What, you make up your mind. How heartless are the Parole Board? This statement was written by myself on the 3rd of October 2019. That was when the Parole Board made their most recent decision in terms of hearing Russell's case, which was heard on the 19th of June, initially 2020, and then again on the 25th of August 2020. They announced the decision to release Russell on the 8th of September. It's understandably disappointing to once again find myself writing a victim impact statement to you. Whilst I've written several over the last few years, I'm never truly able to reflect the continued distress Russell's crimes and silence has on our family in such a short document. As we have already discussed, I would request that the contents of this statement are not made available to Russell nor his representative. This statement is directed at the Parole Board, who shall be making a decision that may significantly impact our lives. We have a valid and genuine fear that Russell Causley or his associates pose a significant risk to our continued safety. I shall refrain from reliving the last few years of our lives. Russell's callous and at times incomprehensible behaviour is well documented and demonstrates nothing but utter contempt for those he shall soon be standing in front of. As a member of the public and as a victim, I want reassurance that the offender's time in prison hasn't been a fruitless exercise. Prison isn't simply a punishment, and it certainly shouldn't just be treated as a clock-watching exercise. In my inexpert opinion, it is an opportunity to gain support and access to necessary resources to change your offending behaviour and ensure you no longer pose an unmanageable risk within society. Russell has spent nearly 23 years in prison for this murder, yet still fails to disclose his victim's remains. I ask, what does he have to lose by doing so? As a victim, I do not feel that Russell can be entrusted. As a family, when reviewing his behaviour over recent years, we do not believe that his mentality has sufficiently changed as such that he will never be tempted to act or behave in a similar manner which imprisoned him all of those years ago. This isn't about continued punishment. This is about understanding why Russell decided in 2014 to admit for the first time to his crimes, and why subsequently Russell has done his utmost to inflict as much pain, upset and trauma as possible to my mother and I. By changing his account or refusing to provide a full and substantiated account of where Russell hid Carole's body and how he ended her life. Russell should have been honest. Russell should have finally ended years of suffering, and Russell should have been at the stage physically, mentally and situationally where providing closure is a logical and decent human thing to do given the serious nature of his offences and his continued plight for reintegration into society. Russell hasn't done any of the above. Russell hasn't been honest, and Russell hasn't ended years of suffering, but instead of his own volition, used his first ever parole hearing as an opportunity to spread fictitious lies in order to lash out. This was following his mistress, Patricia Ward, ending their relationship and her subsequent affair with another married man, where Russell implicated her into the murder for which he is currently serving a life sentence for. Given the seriousness of Russell's admissions and subsequent trauma inflicted on our family in the 3 years following during the reinvestigation by Dorset Police, at no point did Russell think to stop the anguish he was causing. Russell reacted in the cruelest of ways, intentionally wasting hundreds of valuable police man-hours, thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money, was also systematically attempting to break my mother down. This was all, of course, a game to Russell. Russell's behaviour is unforgivable and demonstrates that despite spending a quarter of a century in prison, hasn't changed for the better, and is still as wicked and arrogant as he was during his arrest, trial, conviction, acquittal, and subsequent reconviction, and any period there throughout. Unless you have been in our situation, it's very difficult to relate. Growing up as a child, my life wasn't normal. The concerns and irrational fears many children face weren't the same as mine. Most children were scared of what their parents might say. I was scared of what my grandfather may do. Most children had grandparents who loved them. I had a grandfather who referred to me as it, and openly voiced that given his chance he would have murdered my mother. For what it's worth, I believe him. Most children whilst growing up have a grandfather who will read to them. Instead, I had a grandfather who, whilst imprisoned, wrote a book about a blonde-haired, blue-eyed little boy from Northampton being kidnapped. This was later seized by Dorset Police. Most children I knew growing up felt safe. I didn't. I felt an outcast with no support to understand the life I was born into. The police installed panic alarm in my bedroom, and a list of instructions of what to do if I were attacked were a constant reminder of the serious threat I've always felt under. I didn't have much privacy growing up. If our phone calls weren't being recorded by the police, then we would have instead newspapers harassing us because of my deviant, schizophrenic and murderous grandfather. As with any criminal who commits extremely heinous crimes, it attracts huge amounts of attention. And given that it was his own wife, and that Russell was the first person in British legal history to be convicted of the same murder twice without a body, we received mostly negative attention. People were often quick to judge, and children would often say the wickedest of things. Russell will never truly comprehend the impact he has had on my life. Russell is near enough a complete stranger to me. I've never met him, never seen him in the flesh, and I've never had the opportunity to tell him the pain he has indirectly inflicted, not only on my mother, but also on what was once an innocent little boy. By the age of 14, we were embarking on a High Court appeal, retrial and subsequent reconviction. For a period of 6 months, Russell remained on bail. I was immediately withdrawn from education as the school couldn't guarantee my safety and I was homeschooled. This was a horrific period, and once again, upon his reconviction, we were left to it as a family. I couldn't return back to school, following an assault by 16 teenagers, which resulted in their convictions for assault and ABH at court. By 17, I was an angry young man who was resentful of the education system, the police, courts, probation, and anything else that had left me battered through no fault of my own. It was only a matter of time before I too found myself in front of a judge. I know what it was like as a child living in true fear of what may happen. I know the damage Russell is capable of inflicting, and the genuine fear Russell is capable of instilling. I know that Russell is capable of murder, and as the listener, so do you. On the 4th of June 2019, I welcomed my precious little boy into this world. My son will never know the sad demise of his great-grandmother. Apologies for that. On the 4th of June 2019, I welcomed my precious little boy into this world. My son will never know the sad demise of his great-grandmother, and sadly, similarly to me, he will never have the fortune of meeting her. I want to protect my son from ever having to experience or understand our bitterly sad family history, and likewise, I wish to protect my son from Russell and the genuine threat the convicted wife killer poses to my family and I. Our focus, as with any parent, is on providing the very best possible upbringing for our child. A home where our son feels safe, whilst being surrounded by people who will nurture him to grow into the very best person he can be, while shielding them from the world's evils. I plead with you, do not allow my innocent little boy to grow up like I did with panic alarms in his bedroom. Please don't allow my son to be bullied like I was because of his great-grandfather. Another young, innocent life cannot be influenced as mine has. Please encourage Russell to provide reassurance to us that he has indeed rehabilitated, by allowing us to give Carole the burial any human following death, including Russell, rightfully deserves. I strongly oppose a change in Russell's status and request that the Parole Board take the above impact into consideration when proposing their final recommendation. That's the end of the statement. It wasn't too long, but ultimately, hopefully that sort of summarised in terms of the impact that some of these crimes have. And I could go on, I really could. I'm absolutely, I'm amazed that the Parole Board have come to the decision that they have. And I hope that you too, having listened to this and watched our story and our campaign over the years, can also come to a similar conclusion that this is not acceptable. Bear with me, I've got more